From the St. Francis Yacht Club in San Francisco, this is the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon, hosted by Ron Young.
Welcome to the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon, live from the virtual grill room of the St. Francis Yacht Club. We hope that you and yours are sheltering in place in a comfortable environment, and we look forward to greeting you back in the Yacht Club just as soon as conditions permit. One of the benefits of using Zoom technology or video technology is that we can bring guests from all around the world to our audiences. And this Wednesday Yachting Luncheon exemplifies that opportunity. We have as our guest today, the renowned yacht designer and great bud, Ron Holland. Ron, welcome to the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon.
Thank you, Ron, and I'm very pleased to be back. And I must say, what the time I was physically at the Yachting Luncheon was one of the most spectacular presentations I think I ever did.
Thank you so much. It's great to be able to look out the windows at the Yacht Club and see the big bay. In this case here, we're going to look through our monitors and see your presentation. Now, you're in Vancouver right now. And for those who don't know you, Ron was born in Kiwiland. He is one of a long string of brilliant New Zealanders that found their way to America. In your case, you got here in '69, but tell us before that. Tell us about your early years. When did you first start sailing? What age with you, and what kind of boat was it?
I got a little sailing dinghy, when I was my 7th birthday. But for the first year I had it, I really just paddled it around in ankle deep water. I never actually did much sailing. Then a year later, the family moved to the East Coast Bays near Auckland, which is now a pretty famous Torbay boating club. And I started racing when I was 8.
Describe the boat.
So the boat's called a P-class, and it's a really terrible boat, but it's very safe. You tip over it, it can't sink. So the reason New Zealand has a disproportionate share of gold medals in Olympic sailing is because we all learned to sail on this terrible bloody P-class. And if you can sail a P-class, you can sail anything. So a great example of what's something good coming from something bad.
And so when did you first start drawing? When did you first draw a boat? You're in grammar school, high school, when?
I would say my primary school teachers could tell you about this, because I really got into trouble. I was supposed to be doing lessons. I was drawing boats all day. And this is when I was 10, 11 years old. So I didn't do very well in school. As we found out years later, I was dyslexic, but mostly I just wasn't interested in formal lessons. I was dreaming about the South Pacific Islands and Captain Cook, Captain Vancouver.
Were you drawing everything or just boats, or what were you drawing?
No, it was really pretty boaty, specialist boat. I don't know. I think growing up in New Zealand was a huge influence when I look back at my life from a 75-year-old age that I am now. The New Zealand experience was huge. And because the isolation of the country, every kid, I think, was dreaming about leaving New Zealand. We were so far away from London, New York, and that was a huge influence.
Can you actually remember drawing boats as a little kid?
Oh yeah, I've still got illustrations in my book from when I was 7 or 8 years of age. Boats everywhere.
Were these cat boats? Were these schooners? What were you drawing? Clippers?
Well, clipper ships was the beginning, I think. And then, yeah, schooners were important. So I was a slow starter to read, but once I learned to read, I was a bookworm. So I read about schooners and clipper ships and of course, arriving in San Francisco, I already felt very familiar with the geography, the city.
Now, why did you want to come to San Francisco?
Well, it was a chance from the Kiskadden family. George Kiskadden, a prominent San Francisco yachtsman, commissioned a New Zealand builder designer to build and design a racing schooner. I was friendly with this builder. Now, the schooner was pretty radical. George Kiskadden, you could say George Kiskadden was a radical kind of guy.
Right.
So George Kiskadden was a radical guy, and he was in San Francisco dreaming about the schooner in the late 60s. What a combination. The boat was so radical that the New Zealand designer builder, John Spencer, convinced George to build a 24-foot prototype sailing model just to test the concept. Spencer said, I think we should do this sailing mini version. So they built a 24-foot version of the 70-foot schooner. And Spencer invited me to sail the boat for George when he came to New Zealand to look at this little model. So that's how I met George. And it was a very successful day sailing on Auckland Harbour. And we were at the yacht club at the end of the day having a beer. And George Kiskadden said, Ron, I want you to come to San Francisco, help me rig the boat, sail it, and give feedback to John Spencer while he's doing the big schooner. So that was the invitation to come to San Francisco in 1969.
So was Grey Hope originally was in Auckland Harbor, and then he shipped it up to the city to come to San Francisco?
Exactly. So he was in the shipping business, so he arranged for me and Great Hope to come on a cargo ship. Now, there's also a fun aspect to this story. So I'm heading across the Pacific on a cargo ship towards San Francisco, I thought. But the ship was diverted to LA. And Kiskadden had to get Great Hope off the ship in LA. The way he did that is he sent Commodore Tompkins with his soling trailer to LA. Now, this is a brochure that Commodore produced when I arrived in San Francisco. And now I just want to paint the scene of San Francisco. Here was Tom Blackwell, Gary Mole, Warwick Tompkins.
Punky Mitchell in the lower left car. We didn't call him Alan. Nobody called him Alan. He was Punky Mitchell, exactly. And
and Ed Bennett was the other guy.
Exactly.
So these guys, I arrived incorrectly in LA. Commodore Tompkins came down with a soling trailer, picked up me and Great Hope, drove us to San Francisco. Well, so I'm a 21-year-old wet behind the ears Kiwi, but I know about these guys. I'm reading the magazines, right? I know all about Gary Mole, Blackwell, Tompkins, and I don't let on, of course, on the drive all day, driving up from LA. And now Commodore with Dick Carter and Skip Allen had just won the Fastnet race in Red Rooster. So, hey, I'm coming from New Zealand and I'm landing in the middle of the world famous yachting establishment. So, you know what? I was lucky, right? Very lucky.
Right.
Now, So, I mean, that's the scene. And I want to just expand on it a little bit because of my reading. Not only do I know about the San Francisco scene, I knew about the world yacht design scene. Olin Stevens, L. Francis Herreshoff. Here I am with L. Francis. I went and knocked on his door and had a day with him, which is a special day of my pre-yacht design life.
So you literally, no, wait, I want to go back. Wait, you knocked on the door. You went back east, went to the East Coast. Is this a picture from Connecticut? Is this Mamaroneck, New York? Where is this picture taken?
Yeah, this picture was taken. The background of this story, we've only got half an hour, you told me. The Herreshoff meeting pictured here was in the castle in Marblehead. And it was connected to the Cascade story because I'm in Newport, Rhode Island, getting ready to race the schooner New World to Bermuda. There was a gale and they delayed the race a day. So I told everyone on the schooner, I'm going to Marblehead to meet L. Francis Herreshoff on the day that the race was cancelled or delayed. So, and I was told, Holland, you are dreaming. He's protected by a very protective group of people, and you'll never get to meet him. He's a grumpy old bugger, and you forget it. So, in my normal Kiwi, don't listen to the locals attitude, I get to Marblehead. God knows how I got to Marblehead. I can't remember. And I went to the castle and knocked on the door. And here's Muriel, the very protective assistant. No, sorry, Mr. Harrishoff's not seeing anyone these days. He's very busy. And I said, well, the reason I'm here, a friend of mine is building a Herreshoff's ketch in New Zealand. Oh, you're from New Zealand? Open the door like this. But that happens so often in San Francisco and in Marblehead and all around the world. And it happened because Kiwis had done a good PR job ahead of me. So really I was able to take full advantage of these doors opening. Anyway, so Muriel says, come on and just spend a few minutes with him. Because you're a Kiwi, he'll love to see you. So I walk into the castle and it's like a museum. It's got engines, anchors, windlasses. In the living room is full of this kind of nautical stuff. And she points to the ceiling and there's a glow coming through a hatch in the ceiling and there's a vertical ladder on one wall. She said, go up there. He's up there. So I put my head through the ceiling and this is what I see. L. Francis at the workbench making a silicon bronze tang for a Rosinante catch. I was there 7 hours. So Cascaden had gone to Sparkle Stevens and described what he thought would be a one design class boat for the bay. 33-foot flush deck, fractional rig sloop. And the idea was to build 3 or 4 of these boats and have one design racing on the bay. What George Cascade didn't tell Olin, his intention was also to race this boat across the Atlantic and across the Pacific. Now, somehow, George must have had a drink too much one night in front of Olin because he started talking about his long-term ocean racing plans. And Olin stopped designing the boat. He said, you're asking me for a day race, one design class boat. Are you talking about racing it across the Atlantic to Copenhagen and to Honolulu? I don't want to do, we can't do that. That's too different. So anyway, George pretended to give up on his ocean racing goals and they built the boat. Well, Spirit sailed all over the world. he did the transatlantic Fastnet, Honolulu. And I know all about this boat, because I read the magazines. So my main job coming to the Cascadon House in Divisoria Street was to get Spirit ready for the Tahiti race, besides sailing the schooner. So my job that winter in 1969 at St. Francis Yacht Club, where the boat was moored, was to get Spirit ready. Now, Spirit, there was a problem, a couple of problems. There was a bunch of new rules about ocean racing around this period. And one of the rules was you had to have an engine. What? Spirit never had an engine and didn't need one. They raced all over the world. So George went to me, he said, Ron, I'm afraid we can only do the Tahiti race if we put an engine in. Bloody sacrilege. So I came up with the idea to put an air-cooled lawnmower engine in, which means you didn't need no through-hole fittings. You pull, you start it like this, and the CCA committee were a bit suspicious, so they put a minimum speed requirement. And we had to have Myron Spalding check that we achieved the minimum speed, which we did by quarter of a knot. We just made it. That was one problem solved.
And it stuck over the side of the boat on a rack or something like that?
No, it had a shaft.
So it did have a through-hole fitting ultimately.
It had a throw fitting for the shaft, yeah.
Okay, air cooled. How many horsepower?
7 or 8. So, hey, it's an easy driven narrow boat. So the other problem for the Transpac Race Committee for Cascadon, who Cascadon felt he was being targeted directly and unfairly, minimum crew of 6. Now, Spirit did all that ocean racing with 5 people. So this George is now thinking there's a conspiracy to stop us getting Spirit in the Tahiti race. Gonna take 6 guys. Oh God. Okay, I'm bringing my kid Johnny, who's 7 years old. So we took 7-year-old Johnny Cascadon with us. We had a good crew, including Doug Peterson, who sailed on the boat. A lot of people had sailed on Spirit. Gary Male, Doug Peterson, Quark Tompkins, everyone who was anyone, including Ron Young, sailed on Spirit. So we raced Spirit. The schooner's being built in New Zealand, and we raced Spirit to Tahiti. Here we are, 1970 Transpac. Hey, I'm in heaven. I'm in San Francisco. I'm Fillmore West every Friday night listening to everyone in the music business, and I'm going to Tahiti. What more do you want?
That's it. Heaven.
Here we are. Here we are, crossing the finish line in Tahiti. Look at this. Do you tell me it's perfect? This is where Captain Cook was, for God's sake. So that's the introduction for San Francisco in 1969. Not bad, eh? I'm in San Francisco. Commodore Tompkins introduced me to Gary Male. I showed Gary Male some of my drawings, and Gary says, "You want a job?" So I go over to Oakland and working for Gary Male, mostly making the tea and sweeping the floor. But hey, I'm in heaven. I'm in heaven. And then Commodore influenced my life in another way. He had a dream after winning the fastest race and the last year Jamaica race. He had a dream to do a 40-footer to race all over the world. Gary Male design, and it coincided with me going to work for Mole. Now, I convinced Commodore, the owner, Dave Allen, who is a huge influence on this story, I'll tell you, as you'll hear as we go along, to build the boat in New Zealand. This is where I served my boat apprentice. Oh, so I better go back to failing high school. So I didn't pass my high school exam, but I did get a job working in this boatyard. So I think that was good enough for me. Here I am supervising, in inverted commas, for Gary Mullen, Commodore Tompkins, the 40-foot Improbable. And we built her in New Zealand and won the Jamaica race the next year and took her to England in 1972 and raced. We were the only boat in the race racing for New Zealand.
So you guys are part of the three-boat team from New Zealand?
Exactly, yeah. We just were, they only let us do that once. You know, they were never allowed to do that one boat thing again. But we got there. We were, here we are coming back across the Atlantic. This is fun to show because it shows that the boat was pretty radical. It was a tiller-steered 40-footer.
Right.
And here we are, theoretically, we're delivering the boat with, we raced the hell out of the thing on deliveries. Here we are with a spinnaker up, mid-Atlantic, flat out, two guys on the helm. Hey, you can't screw around when you're delivering. Then the story comes to Florida. This is like 3 or 4 years later. I'm working for Charlie Morgan in Florida, Morgan Yacht Corporation. And we joined a group of St. Petersburg Bay sailors doing this new class called quarter ton. And a bunch of people were going to do quarter tonners and race the first quarter ton championship in England. Now, I built my boat. So I had saved $6,000 from working on a Improbable for 2 years. And I put that total $6,000 into this quarter tonner. Now, another nice connection was Commodore Tompkins came to Tampa Bay and helped me rig the boat. This is pretty cool, huh?
Yeah, couldn't do better than having him do the rigging, right?
Yeah, so we won that regatta and took the boat to England and won the quarter ton cup. So I'm in England and having won the quarter ton cup in my quarter tonner, 18, and some Irish guys got hold of me and said, come to Cork. We want to talk about doing a one-tonner next season. So I go to Ireland and I meet the local sailmaker and yacht owner, Hugh Coveney, John McWilliam. And we built this boat in Ireland. It's a Kiwi-built kind of wooden boat. And we were very successful with Golden Apple. This is how I created Ron Holland Design. I'm in Ireland. We've got a one-tonner that we took to England and kicked the English one-ton asses. We're very successful. We didn't win the one-ton cup, but we were so fast that I got a lot of orders for boats. So I started Ron Holland Design back in San Francisco. So David Allen met Commodore and Gary Mull and created Improbable, pretty revolutionary boat. I'm the BN, lucky for me. And so a couple of years after I start my design business, Dave Allen calls me up and said, I want you to do me a race boat, but I don't want those IOR looking boats. I want you to do something different for me. I want to make sure it goes downwind like Improbable, but it's got to win an IOR too. So the boat that came out of this discussion was Imp. It went to the Admiral's Cup in 75 and returned in 77, winning races all the time. Commodore introduced me to the center of the universe of yacht racing crews. and I am taking advantage of it. I'm not fucking around. I'm taking full advantage of this. And this boat won everything and put me on the map as an Iowa yacht designer. There's another cool thing about this image, what I didn't realize when I first picked it. Every boat in this image is a Ron Holland design. This is the height of the 75 Admirals Cup in England. And every boat you can see is one of my boats. We kicked ass for a few years.
How'd you get the name M? Where'd that come from?
Oh, Dave Allen wanted to connect it to Improbable. Now, this is a few years on, 81. So it's kind of the end of the Admirals Cup World Championship time period. I did a boat for New Zealand Admirals Cup team called Swaziland. That was the top scoring boat in the 81 Admirals Cup. And then the world started getting richer and the boats got bigger. So I left racing and went for the money with like Kilroy and Bob Bell and the maxi racing boats. Hey, you got to keep going. You can't stop. So this period, early 70s, was the maxi boat period. And I did several successful maxi boats, starting off with Jim Kilroy. So now I'm going to jump from the early 70s to the mid 80s.
Kiwi Magic.
So what happened was Alan Bond took the America's Cup away from your yacht club.
83.
Hey, now, if you had have asked me in all this period I've been talking about, or if you'd have said, one day New Zealand will win the America's Cup, you'd have to go impossible. You know, New Zealand winning the America's Cup, no way.
Teeny little country, blah, blah, blah. Right.
Yeah. So Alan Bond winning the Cup started this New Zealand thing because Kiwi sailors don't have much respect then for Australian sailors. Like if Alan Bond and Bob Miller can win the bloody thing, we can win it. So the emphasis of New Zealand challenging for the America's Cup started when Alan Bond won it. And then we built our plastic boats and took them to Fremantle and won most of the races.
You lost only one race in the trials. You were faster than daylights. We had a per leg analysis of every race. And you were, in our opinion, the fastest boat.
So this America's Cup story from a yacht design perspective was a big deal because it was the first time I'd had the opportunity to do research and development in yacht design. All these IOR boats I was doing by the seat of my pants, no research. The Cup gave us a chance to spend money on research. Here we are in the University of Southampton in England, and here we are in the Swedish Institute of Technology wind tunnel.
For those who haven't spent a lot of time in yacht design or tunnel testing, what you can test in a hydrodynamic tunnel, in a water tank test, you can also test actually more quickly in a wind tunnel because they're both fluids, air and water are both fluids, and you can speed up the air to, several hundred miles an hour, and it's almost the same as, and really simulates the slow fluid that you get when you go in a water tank test. So what Ron's talking about here is, doing the tank testing and then doing wind tunnel testing. It's really the same thing. It's just a different application of the technology.
Look, here we are designing our 1985, 86, 87 period. Hey, this was a fax. For God, this is the technology, man. We had no computers. We had a fax machine. So Laurie Davidson and Bruce Farr and Russell Bowler and I with the design team on this program, and we were communicating between New Zealand, Annapolis, and Cork in Ireland via fax. Hey, no computers. Here we are, Kiwi Magic. And this was a best wishes, guys. Beat Dennis, for God's sake. 1986. Fax down to team headquarters in Fremantle. So the technology changed. This is San Francisco again, and then Bermuda, and now in Auckland. Hey, what's next? We don't know yet. Now I'm going to shift emphasis. After the Frio Cup, the world got richer. My clients got older and wanted comfort, but we didn't want to give up performance. So the ultimate project I had the opportunity to do was a 250-foot sloop. And here it is. Hey, this is a serious project. I could talk all day about this too. Now, I've done a series of big boats with Perini Navy. And this sail I'm showing here on Perseus is a 200-foot sloop. It's the biggest sail ever made. That's fun. That was fun. Hey,
How tall is the rig? How tall is the rig in that boat?
It's 230-something feet, 240 feet, I think.
So that would not go under the Golden Gate Bridge for our audience to know.
Well, Marabella especially, 300-foot rig.
Right, exactly. Wouldn't go under the Golden Gate Bridge.
Wouldn't go under any bridge. The most recent boat I've done for the Perini Navy shipyard, it's actually for Larry Ellison, is a 200-foot ketch Katana. So I just couldn't help throwing this and to get back to San Francisco and bring Larry Ellison. So this is my last project, you could say, 140-foot schooner. Give you a glimpse of this. But see, it's obviously a high-tech sailing boat. You know, my clients want comfort and beauty, but they get my performance whether they like it or not. Here's my last design team. So I'm kind of retired, but 10 years ago, I left Ireland and decided to have a change. Went to Vancouver, retired, got the chance to do this schooner and pulled together a new team. On the left is a New Zealand girl who's a UBC Naval Architect graduate, Laura Fugge. She does all the technical design work for me. Behind her is Catherine Walsh, a long-term friend of mine for over 15 years, and who's with Holly and the Green Blouse, sort of managing the company. On the right is a Turkish graduate of UBC, Naval Architect, Yusu. In the height of our racing career, we had 15, 20 people working for me. And we had the first big computer design system in the 80s, the beginning of the 80s. And I always just chose to design with pencil and paper. But those drawings that I do go into a computer environment and the builder gets much more accurate information. So now I want to switch back to San Francisco. Throughout my whole life, I've had this San Francisco connection. And the current connection is Mary Crowley and her Ocean Voyages, which is a spin-off in a way from George Cascadden. And she's made a serious effort to clean up plastic in the ocean. And I want to acknowledge my interest in this. And here we are in my design studio in Vancouver.
You got your book, All the Oceans.
I should be promoting my book. So these stories I'm telling you, mostly the book has different stories. Yeah, you want to know about the in-depth story about Holland design? The kid that didn't pass high school, that couldn't read until he was 12, 13. These are the stories. This is what happened. This is what happened. Lucky to meet Commodore Tompkins and George again. So nicely, the yachting industry 3 or 4 years ago acknowledged my overcoming not being able to read as a kid and gave me this award. So that is a thrill. It's the Oscars, you know. It's if you can't get to Hollywood, you can do it in Cortina, Italy. There we go. That's the end.
So talk about Kiskaden as a client. You now have billionaires as clients, and talk about the differences between different clients.
So we had this 80s, 90s period of racing yachts. And as I mentioned, those owners got older and richer. So I had the opportunities from my racing yacht clients, like Dave Allen, to do bigger boats. And the yachting world kind of changed. It was a bit like the turn of the previous century when Herreshoff was designing America's Cup boats like Resolute, 140-foot sloops. There was a bit of a return to that, where most of our design work was over 100-foot long sailboats. And that's the way it ended up. And the clients evolved from our race boat competitors, if you like, to billionaires. So we got used to being friends and dealing with these rich guys. It was fun. We had a great time. I'm proud to end up mostly friends with our clients.
Talk about when you do the interiors. You're doing the lines, and you're basically getting the boat to get through the water fast, and of course to be beautiful. And you have subcontractors. How do you do the interiors?
When I started doing bigger boats, I was doing a yacht type interior. We had no interiors in our race boats, as you know. So I was kind of copying traditional yachting interiors. In the end of the 80s, when the big cruising boats were becoming most of my work, there was a new field related to yacht interior design. Now, this is a whole new area of design. It's like interior design for boats. There's quite a few very talented designers specializing in this field. And several of my most well-known sailboats have interiors by these very well-known and wealthy now interior designers. So it's a whole new field, Ron, that came into being in the last 20, 30 years. I've only been into court once in my yacht design career. It's a story worth recounting. It's to do with another pretty high profile client, the rock star Simon Le Bon. Simon Le Bon took over a yacht that I designed for the Round the World race, and he renamed it Drum and put together a new team of people to finish the boat. It was in construction when he took over. I normally would have been involved, but his new team had a project manager, and so I wasn't involved anymore. But so they took my basic design finished the boat, and took it off in a practice race around Farstead Rock. The keel fell off. I'm going to expand on the story on this. So they're sailing along the south coast of England in the Farstead race, leading the fleet. And this is a story told by an elderly retired merchant seaman, and he tells it was a great story. I've heard this personally from him. So he's walking the dog, and he says, "Oh, there's Drum heading down towards Land's End, leading the Farstead fleet." A high-profile story after Simon Le Bon bought the boat. So he says, "Oh, there's Drum." He looks away to catch his dog, looks back, Drum's gone. He's looking, where the hell did that maxi yacht go? Then he sees an upturned bottom with no keel, just a rudder sticking up. Oh my God. So he rings his base down the coast, the lifeboat base. What a chance. And rings his, "Hey, the Drum just capsized in front of my eyes here. Get the lifeboat." So the lifeboat was back at Drum very fast, unbelievably fast. Before the helicopters came, the lifeboat was at the boat. A few years later, Simon Le Bon's doing a concert, a Duran Duran concert in Vancouver. And I say, "Simon, you want to go for a sail?" He said, "Can I bring a bunch of the band with me?" So we're out sailing on a 60-foot a friend of mine loaned me. And Simon is telling the story of the Drum capsize. Obviously, the first time the band have ever heard this story. So I'm all ears. I'm hearing stuff I never heard before. Simon is telling the story of being inside the boat. That was scary. Now, because the guys inside the boat thought they were going to drown. It went all dark and they had water up to their knees, standing on the deck. It was scary. But the lifeboat and the helicopter guys arrived, and they sent a Navy swimmer type guy to go under the boat. So this Navy guy dives under the boat and comes through the hatch to Simon and half the crew are all sitting around, totally freaking out. Well, the Navy guy actually did a little controlled panic because his first reaction was battery acid. The batteries fell over and the batteries acid mixed with the water. You could hardly breathe inside the boat. So he was way more concerned. See, the guys inside the boat were worried about sinking. The Navy guy said, "You guys are going to get out of here," not because of sinking, because of the contamination of the air. And it was a bit of a mess. He had a hell of a job going under the lifelines, past all the running rigging, and into the hatch. So he was quite particular about describing how you had to get out. And he made some comment like, "I actually can't help you for liability reasons. I'll guide you, but you got to do this on your own." And Simon was the first guy to say, "I'll have a go, hold your breath and swim out." That was pretty scary. Anyway, they all got out and they're all on top of the boat. A famous photograph that I decided not to show you. The insurers of Drum sued everyone, right? That's what you do. We learned this is the business. Everyone, including me, gets sued. Because I went straight back, looked at my keel design and went, "Wow, this is the same as Kilo, Condor, all these maxi boats sailing all over the world, bulletproof. We don't screw around with keel design, bulletproof." I was waiting in Falmouth and the south coast of England when they towed upside down drum into the port. And when I looked at the bottom of the boat, the top plate of the keel was bolted to the bottom of the boat. All the welding had given away. The welding, it looked like the welding had been done in the rain. It was so porous. You know, I mean, if I'd have been supervising this, it would have been bloody obvious.
That's why the drum keel broke. The fastener, the keel was fastened still to the hull, but it was the weld of the keel to the top plate of the keel.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and I had to defend our design, which we successfully did, in the London High Court. That's an experience you don't want to go through.
So, Ron, did you wear a wig in the High Court?
But the other guys were wearing wigs. So that's the only time I was in a legal problem, if you like, and we cleared our name, but it was a traumatic and difficult situation.
Back in 87 Cup, which really started in 85, 86, 87, when you guys decided to do the plastic, 3 plastic boats, whose idea, whose insight was it that you could build plastic 12 meters successfully versus all the aluminum ones? People who don't know this, there were wooden 12 meters until the first one was, I think, Courageous was the first aluminum one in 74. And after that, they were all aluminum until the 87 Cup in Perth, where we had 2 aluminum, we had 61, the aluminum bow rudder 12 meter, and you guys, the Kiwis, had 3 plastic 12 meters. You may remember the moment in the press conference, you may have been there, I was there, when Dennis Conner leans over and looks over and says, I don't know why you would have built a plastic 12 meter unless you wanted to cheat, which was a insulting, inaccurate statement. It wasn't true. You weren't doing anything that was not illegal. But the point is, he did that because he realized, like everybody else did, you had the fastest rides in the room.
Let me give you the rationale. We decided that the best way to design the fastest 12 meter in the world would be to have a real trial horse situation. So we were going to build 2 identical boats and test keels, rudders, sails, masts.
2 boat match rate testing.
So you go, hey, we're going to build 2 boats the same. Got to build a mold. Take them out of a mold. And that was a mutual decision between Laurie Davidson, me, and Bruce Farr and Russell Bowler. So we're going to build 2 identical boats, test differences on them, and then build a 3rd boat with all what we learned. Hey, pretty good program for the first try.
Very good.
Never lost a race until Dennis changed his wings and got more wind in the last series.
So in the famous moment when the United States lost the America's Cup for the first time in 1983, there was some chatter and sort of controversy about the fact that perhaps Ben Lexen had gotten the idea of the winglet keel when he was in the Netherlands tank testing facility, and Joop Sloof had suggested it to him. But you know that, in fact, Ben Lexen's idea, back when he was still allowed to use his own name, Bob Miller, had already had that insight.
Another thing on this subject I'd like to say, Ron, is that when Bondi did his famous lift the boat out of the water at Newport after they won, I was horrified at how big those wings were. They looked bloody slow, draggy to me. So there was all kinds of other, there's lots of integrated reasons why the wings were helped, not just the wings. You couldn't just put wings on an existing boat. It would be slower. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But you make the boat smaller, make the keel heavier with the wings, and you go faster. That's oversimplification.
Ron Holland, it's been such a delight spending time with one of the world's greatest yacht designers, especially in such a fun way for you to talk about getting bounced out of high school, not being able to make it at all in the civilized world of education before you became, pardon the term, but a genius yacht designer, and with billionaire clients. It's been fun and refreshing. You're always a great guy to spend time with. Thanks so much for taking time to share with the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon your story.
Thank you, Ron. And you know, I want to acknowledge again the San Francisco influence. George Hiskadden, Commodore Tompkins, Gary Mull, Tom Blackhawler. Hey, it was a big influence.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. For the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon, this is Ron Young.
This has been a presentation of the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon.